Attention, attention.
The live broadcast you have tuned into is a pre-recorded episode of the Dudes and Beer podcast. Dudes and Beer is presently traveling the vast void of time and space in an effort to find you more of the best content in the known universe. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, if you can't be good at it. Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host, and I am so entirely honored to have our guest on this evening. As many of you who follow the Facebook group know, I am an avid backyard astronomer. I love my night sky, my planets, my stars, and I ran across this connection online. The actual CEO and founder of Astronomers Without Borders, Mr. Mike Simmons, is joining us this evening to talk about everything that Astronomers Without Borders is about, what it is to be a backyard astronomer. It doesn't take crazy technology, everybody. It just takes time for observation. So welcome so much to the program, Mr. Simmons. How are you today?
Well, I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. I love the title of this, Dudes and Beer. So I should grab one, but a little early now.
Well, I'm actually cheating because it's a little bit early on my end as well. So yeah, that was a soda that I just opened. Everybody, it was not actually a beverage
there you go.
that I normally have. But I refuse to start my show without the crack of a can. Because the idea behind Dudes and Beer is to sit back, have a strong beverage, have a beverage of your choice, and to talk about deep conversations, talk about things that matter in the world, that we should take more time out of our day to pay attention to. And I think that some of the things that Astronomers Without Borders is about is exactly one of those conversations that needs to be had.
Well, that's great. Yeah, thanks. I look forward to talking about it with you. And it's one of those things that, just sort of happened. And it's one of those things that it's like with your podcast. If there's an audience, people will come. There's a need.
Yeah.
So it's sort of how it came about. It's very, very grassroots.
Well, and that's what I love about it, is that it is depending on that grassroots mentality, that grassroots infrastructure. Tell us, and tell myself and our audience out there, how it is that you came to a love of astronomy, because you are not an astronomer by trade, but how it is that you came to a love of astronomy, and what it was that brought about the beginnings and the seeds that became Astronomers Without Borders.
Yeah, well, as far as I get asked about when I got interested in astronomy, and that goes back into the recesses of my memory that I have no access to, because I can't remember I can't remember ever not being interested in astronomy. I remember So I'm a little bit older, and I was a kid when the space age started. I remember Sputnik being launched, and I was already very much into astronomy and space at that time. I used to go out and look at the sky and try to find things. I just didn't know what I was doing. I remember doing astronomy-based things in elementary school. So I guess I was born with an astronomy gene. But it's one of those things that, in decades of doing outreach, so many people have said I was always fascinated by astronomy when I was younger, and then they kind of get out of it. But the roots are still there. It's something that's truly universal. And that really sort of leads to what Astronomers Without Borders is all about, because I have not I didn't become a professional astronomer. I planned on it. I actually went to school with an astronomy major as an undergraduate, but I had roots in another career as well and went on with that instead. But I've stayed in astronomy the whole time. And one of the things that I have done is since '79, when we had a total solar eclipse here in the U.S., the last one before the 2017. Is try to get the total solar eclipses around the world whenever I could. And one of them in '99 actually took me to Iran. Now, this was a big deal going across Europe. How I ended up in Iran instead of in Turkey like I'd planned is a whole other story too. But I found astronomy as absolutely huge there. The people were enthusiastic, very young population. Very different than here. It's dominated by women. So rather than us older guys in astronomy like in the U.S., it's really mostly young women. And when I came back, I wrote some articles for magazines and gave presentations on astronomy in Iran. Well, it turns out the presentations and the articles were really more about the culture and the people than anything else. And it became clear that astronomy transcends all those other things that are going on with governments and with news bites and all these things. People saw these young people in Iran, they saw themselves in these people as students, and they were interested in what was going on in the country, not with the things we usually hear about, but with the people themselves. They were interested in the same things, and the sky really is completely over all of us, and we share the same sky. I even, when I stay with friends in Tehran, I've got the same sky that I do here in Southern California when I'm at home. So that's really what started it. That was the seed, and I visited some other places like Iraq and some other places and decided we got to make this into a bigger thing. And it started as just groups and people in different places connecting together and deciding what to do together.
And that's what I love about the idea of it, is that it is utterly organic. It's people that are focused on the same common goal. And
absolutely. And it's really, the early days when we didn't have that many people involved, it was all about people saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And we'd say, well, let's all do it together. It's really what it amounted to.
Well, and it's interesting because, there has been such a push lately. For instance, famed actor Alan Alda has started a whole communication realm between scientists. Like he now puts on an educational program teaching scientists the concepts of improv comedy so that they can get inside each other's heads and actually not only communicate their ideas to each other, but be able to communicate their ideas to a broader audience and to an audience of regular people so that they can understand how important the work is.
And that's interesting.
It's interesting to me that you have actually started a grassroots movement among backyard astronomers, and most people don't realize that. Sure, there's the Kepler telescope and NASA and JPL and all kinds of places with amazing technology and telescopes, but more things have been discovered by backyard astronomers than most of those put together.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been done. In the early days of astronomy, really, there wasn't that much of a distinction between professional and amateur. A lot of people who became very famous observers at observatories didn't have the background in it. Astronomy now is more specialized, and you really need a background in physics and so on. But it's sort of come back to amateurs in a lot of ways now because there isn't enough telescope time, and the smaller telescopes can do a lot because of the technology, because of the cameras. So there's a new engagement now with citizen scientists. But your point about Alan Alda's thing, that's interesting. That's new to me. And one of the things that we've started that's turned out to be a very big thing not my idea. Never would have thought of it, but an artist has started a program that's about astro arts, and this is about people who do art in astronomy. Astronomers sometimes who do art, and we realize that the connection between the two, there are different ways of looking at the same thing. There are different perspectives and different ways of expressing our fascination with the night sky. So it's
Oh no, I think we just lost our guest. Hold on just a moment. Hello?
a problem.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I think that was a glitch on my end. I see I'm having
That's okay.
in fact, looking at the router, I'm surprised we're even connected here. Um, it's I'm in one of the very hard hit areas of one of the recent fires here in Southern California, and we
Yeah.
didn't have any internet for 6 weeks, and it's back up, but it's glitchy, so it drops out once in a while.
Well, if need be, I can call you on a landline or I can call you on a cell phone and we can continue should anything happen along
Okay.
the way.
Yeah, the
So,
landline is VoIP, so it'll do the same thing. But
okay.
we got other things. I've got an iPad I can use to connect through Skype too, if that's better.
All right. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, just the idea that astronomers, that scientists can now communicate faster than we ever could. The fact that we can have this conversation right now over just a standard system at home is pretty incredible. And most definitely, even since I was a kid, I was born in 1975, but even since I was a kid, the technologies that is available to the general public, as far as binoculars, is like you can easily go onto Amazon and find a pair of observational binoculars for $120, and
Sure.
be able to see Saturn. Be able to see it, not with any great detail, but it'll be like big enough to at least see a ring. Um,
Yeah. Well, there's plenty that can be done, and a large part of the world. So there's amateur astronomy. There are astronomy enthusiasts, backyard astronomers, everywhere around the world. So I know of them in countries that are war torn, and other places where you would not expect it. And but the fascination is still there, and it's even more needed in some of the countries where the difficulties are greatest. The connection is technology that's allowed us to connect and do these things together, sort of like making a worldwide club. But also, here's something that's ironic is that for those of us that live in big cities, we can't see the sky the way we used to be able to see it because of the lights. Very few stars appear. But those people in developing countries, especially out in rural areas, that may have the least resources and don't have electric lights burning all night, have the best skies. They can see the sky better than anybody. And you really don't need more than that. You can look up and watch the planets moving through the stars. You can learn where there are star clusters. I'm sorry. We're back, but that problem was on my end, and I see it happening here again. I did not expect this.
That is okay. Not a problem whatsoever.
Okay. All right. Well, great. I'm glad because I could connect through something else if need be. But
believe me, I've had much worse problems lately.
Yeah. Well, and that's this is first world problems.
Yeah, exactly.
We expect to have perfect internet all the time and broadband, and here, oh my goodness, I can't.
Yeah.
Now I can't communicate with anybody in the world for the next 20 seconds. So
yeah, exactly.
Could be worse.
But it's awesome that you have taken the time to set up a community where people can share information, where people can come together with the use of backyard technology, with the use of the internet. How far? I know it's without borders, but as of right now, number one, how long ago did you start Astronomers Without Borders, and how far has the border reached so far?
Well, the last question is easy. That it covers the world. I guess I could probably think of countries that we don't have people participating, but I don't really even know because not everybody's registered as a member. We have almost 100,000 followers on Facebook, and we have people taking part in programs. Last year I was at an international meeting about communicating astronomy to the public, sponsored by the IAU, and I approached a group from Malaysia because I didn't have any contact with people in Malaysia. And I said, well, yeah, I represent this group called Astronomers Without Borders. Well, it turns out they were taking part all the time. I just wasn't aware. We're very active there. So yeah, how far it's gone? Well, I'd say worldwide, and if there are caveats to that, I'm not even sure what they are. When did we start? Well, we incorporated in 2007. In 2008, I was actually, because I was asked to co-lead a project for the International Year of Astronomy in 2009. And so we didn't really start in earnest till 2010. So we're going on, our 10th year here. That I want to mention the International Year of Astronomy. What I led was called 100 Hours of Astronomy. And one of the things we did was to have a global star party. That meant we're all going to have a star party on one night. Star party meaning taking your telescopes out and showing the public. So a public star party. And it was one night that went around the world as it got dark, and it was really a great proof of concept because we had many tens of thousands of amateur astronomers taking part, people who had never gone out and done this with the public before. And we had at least 500,000, and I think as much as 1 million people look through telescopes in that one night. So that shows what you can do when you all get together and have a common goal and a common passion. And it's really a passion, as you know.
Yeah, and I myself, living in Austin, have the issue of light pollution. It takes me a good 20-30 minutes to get out to where there's nothing, where I can actively see things, at least with the naked eye. But man, on a good clear night, you can see the Milky Way, you can see planets, and right now there's a great display of planets going on in our sky right now. Mars just started rising, all kinds of stuff. So.
Oh yeah, you can see the workings of the solar system. If you understand what it is you're seeing and what those motions are, you're seeing 3D. I mean, it is 3D because you're looking at it different distances. You just have to understand, and it's fascinating. That is living as a citizen of the solar system and of the universe when you know what you're looking at.
Precisely, and it really is something that I think presents the grandeur of life to us. Whenever we can take time to get away, to pause. I don't think, especially with today's society, most people living in a major city take time to seek out the opportunity. To go slightly out into the country, or where there's a little bit less light, and appreciate such things.
Well, yeah, they don't realize what they're missing. It's been a little over 100 years with electric lights now, and we're losing our connection even with those ancestors who lived outside of cities routinely, or lived in cities that were not so bright. So. It's sort of like, if you've never seen more than a few trees, you have no concept of what it's like to be in a forest, and you wouldn't seek it out. But there's something special about it, and so people today really aren't aware. Even the photographs that show the Milky Way and so on, people sometimes say, "Why do you make it look like that? That's not what the sky looks like." Well, they don't know. And that's
Yeah.
fortunate. We're missing a big part of our culture. It's half of our environment.
Well, and not just that. I think it's half of our cultural inheritance and
Mm,
history.
mm.
Once you start looking at things and really like you are the global perspective, um, like though America has a great connection to the realm of astronomy, the
Mm-hmm.
history of watching the stars goes every culture across the globe
Yes.
has oddly enough some of almost the same stories about
Mm-hmm.
different star clusters, things like that. Even coming from the stars. So to me it's the fact of we are actively robbing ourselves from something that we we should have full access to.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely true. It's been a part of every culture throughout time, and that's really clear. And imagine if you grew up on a planet, if we evolved on a planet that was covered with clouds all the time, so we never saw the stars. There'd be no 5-star reviews. There'd be, there's so many things you start looking out at it that involve the sky, and we don't even think about it anymore. And but if you start looking for it, you just see it everywhere. So it always has been an important part. It's become more abstract now, but it's something. I always encourage people to go out, just go check it out and see what's there. At least you'll know, even if you don't go back.
Well, and the parallels across science with backyard astronomy go just so hand in hand. The whole example right now of even the privatization of space, and the fact that private industry is getting ready to put an actual base on the moon,
Yep.
stuff like that. Like at one point, the things that only major governments and government entities or things like NASA, government funded private entities were doing, now regular people can go out and do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just phenomenal to know that the technology has come around so much that you can now have a powerful enough telescope to not only track the stars at night on the table in your backyard, but to record high definition video,
Yeah.
and really get incredible detail with things that are within a paycheck's budget.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, in the whole space industry that's developed too. Um, the astronauts that I know and have talked to always started with an interest in astronomy. And in most of the world, astronomy and space science, space exploration are not split into two separate things like they are in the U.S. It makes
Yeah.
sense in the U.S. because we just have this huge space industry, including, of course, the government to start with and NASA. But there are parts of the same thing. And this idea, I mean, why do people want to start programs? Why does some of these billionaires who have made so much money want to go out and start something that takes people into space? Is there money to be made on that? In the short term, no. There are different plans. It's just something people feel compelled to do. It is. It's just something with us as a species. It's innate.
Yeah, there is the yearn for exploration, the wanderlust,
Yeah.
almost, of the next step,
Right,
and
but
what we can do.
But I always make the point, too, that when you look up at the sky and you see a bunch of lights and you don't know what they are, but then you learn about them and you start looking more and you do it with that pair of binoculars and maybe the telescope, you're exploring space, too. It is very much a journey of discovery to look up in the sky and understand what's there, just like traveling around the earth and exploring new things there. There's just a whole universe out there that you can see, you can experience in very simple ways, as you pointed out. So it does. There are different reasons people are interested in doing astronomy, but it really is exploration. It really is discovery. And the first time you look through a telescope, and you see the moon up close, or the rings of Saturn, or something like that. I mean, you hear things come out of people's mouths you would not expect. You know, they're surprised. They have suddenly traveled to a place where now they can see for themselves something they've always seen in pictures. It's just like traveling on Earth, but it's unlimited.
Yeah, and I was always fascinated by astronomy as a child. I was always fascinated by science, rocketry, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I hit my junior year in high school and took astronomy, or I guess my senior year, and took astronomy, that I got my hands for the first time. I remember seeing the eclipse as a kid through the telescope at the museum.
Oh yeah.
And that was pretty cool. And Halley's Comet.
Yep.
That was pretty awesome. But and that really gave me my fascination. But the first time I saw Saturn's rings, where it wasn't just like a yellow blob in a telescope, where it was like, wow, look at that.
It's you just can't explain to people.
Yeah.
How amazing that is.
That begat my true love of the science of astronomy, and the real appreciation of it.
Yeah.
And
mine was similar. I mean, you know, I mentioned I was really fascinated as a kid, and it was later. I was, I think, 20 or so before I got my hands on some binoculars and really started learning. Was able to learn because I didn't have any guidance on it as a kid, and got back into it, and that's when it took off.
Yeah, and I myself have a decent pair of binoculars that I can see things with. Nothing crazy. It magnifies the moon really well. So I've become much more of a moon body, I guess. But any chance I get, I am finding a star party. I know that there is a gentleman out here in Texas, if you're anywhere near the Belleville area, that hosts star parties. He built a castle, literally a castle, and one of his turrets has a backyard observatory in it. And it's beautiful because it's out in the middle of nowhere where you can see the Milky Way and stuff like that. So it's really great, and you can go and reserve the place for star parties, all that kind of stuff. But how do most people go about finding such a community nowadays?
Well, yeah. So as far as locally, like what you're talking about there, we get questions all the time. Frequently from parents saying, my child is really interested in astronomy. How can I get him or her more involved? And we just look up a local astronomy club for them and suggest that they go there. And that's the best thing. That's the best way to get started too, because it is really something completely new. And some of us will sit there and be very patient about learning things and how to point the telescope and so on. But really the best way to get not only involved, but to get interested even more and to learn what the capabilities are is to find a local astronomy club or even a couple of people, you know, and they're out there, they're everywhere. And so that's a great way to get going in it. As far as a larger community like Astronomers Without Borders, I can't even really tell you that, where there's 7 billion people on Earth, and we've hardly touched, you know, it. So, but I think the astronomy clubs often hear about us from some sort of an article or a podcast like this or something like that. So we do our best to get the word out, but it's tough.
Yeah, it's because it is, I guess, for most people considered a very niche interest. It's kind of like, I guess it'd be almost like people who are like reptile lovers, you know, where do you find a reptile expo these days?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is one of those things everybody's fascinated by, though. Yeah. When you start doing outreach and the average person on the street, there's a great video out that I'll go ahead and plug here. I think it's called A New Way to See the Moon. It's like 5 minutes, and they did the best job of capturing public outreach that I've ever seen. Guy just happened to take his telescope out to look through it at the moon, and people walked by, so they made this video about people looking for the first time. And these are people, they never would have looked through a telescope otherwise. They never would have occurred to them, but they're all fascinated, and the reactions are priceless. So it's a niche as far as people participating actively, like what you're doing and like what I do. But the interest is always there.
Mainly, like we said, there is something instinctual about looking up at the night sky. Or even whenever I go out, I like it. Quite a bit of my work revolves around the hours of about 5 in the morning. And leaving my house before dawn. And I love those times where I get to drive and actively see stars out in the sky.
Right.
As I drive along what would normally be a well-lit road that, the lights have cut off getting ready for sunrise.
Oh yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah.
And to be able to go, what would you say are some of the first steps that somebody can take to go from being a general sky gazer to being a backyard astronomer?
Well, I think the main thing is to learn what's up there. I mean, see what the workings of the sky are. When you talk about the Milky Way, that's our galaxy. That's 100 million stars. And it's just this massive structure that we're looking at, and it's kind of a squash disk. And when you look towards Sagittarius, which is in the south for those of us in North America, and I'm sorry, I said 100 million stars, 100 billion stars. This is really big. And when you look towards the center, you see that bulge, and you look at pictures of other galaxies outside of our own, and you realize that's what we're looking at. We're inside of it. And you kind of look around and say, it's like doing virtual reality. You look around and say, wow, look at this. Look at what we're looking at. I mean, I can see our whole galaxy here surrounding us. And then the planets, how they move and so on. Now, I think that knowledge, just some understanding, getting familiar with it, that's really kind of the way I did it. May not be the only way. Some people go out and buy an expensive telescope that will find objects for them, and then they see them. But I like to have the context to understand what's what. So I think that's most important. Whether you start with a telescope or just start with nothing or start with binoculars, they're all good ways of doing it, whatever really is of interest to you. Some people love the technology, so they want to get a fancy computerized telescope, and that's what hooks them, so that's fine.
I'm not gonna lie, my God, the urge is so strong to do exactly that. But it's also one of those, unfortunately, with as much travel time as I have on the calendar typically, there's no way I could actively fit it in enough to justify it. And it's sad whenever you look back at things and go, wow, I don't really have the time to go out and observe the way I used to. And how often do you find yourself in the same kind of situation?
Oh, all the time. I don't have time most of the time. I am traveling a lot. But also I get busy. I live outside of a city. The sky is okay. I can see the Milky Way just a little bit on good nights. But you know what? I often just go out and just take a look around. Just as you'd go out and take a look around the neighborhood. It is the neighborhood. I do have some binoculars. I'll get out once in a while. I don't get a telescope out very often at all anymore. But I do go out and say, oh, here's what's going on. Oh, here's Venus coming up in the evening sky or the morning sky, and just sort of look around. I do wish I had more time to do more observing and deep sky observing, looking at the really far away faint things. That'd be great. But but I don't disconnect from the sky altogether.
Yeah, I don't know that I could ever necessarily do that.
Yeah.
Where I'm not actively going out trying to see a meteor shower, or something like that.
Right.
I'm always posting the latest astronomic phenomena on our Dudes and Beer Facebook group, so that everybody knows about that stuff.
Right.
I think everybody should take the time to try and, I guess, see the speck that you are and the actual ocean that you live in, that is the universe. And maybe so much of what ails all of us as a society would kind of dwindle away at that point, you know.
Yeah, it would certainly make a difference. The other thing too is to recognize that this one speck in the universe, and realizing that there's much more than that. And astronomy is like the overview effect for the rest of us. When we're observing, you go out in Austin and you take a look at something, say you're looking at the moon. Well, it may be just rising there, but there are people who are looking at it in Africa at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's setting there. And then you realize we're just all on this one little planet. And, you mentioned too, and this is a common thing, people say, realize how small we are. But at the same time, you realize that we're part of something so much bigger.
Yeah.
And so that's a positive thing too.
It's a greatly positive thing, and that's why I encourage everybody to go out and have a little time with the night sky. Make your way out to a local lake, to a dark field, something like that. Find yourself somewhere. I guarantee you, even near a city, within 15 to 20 minutes, you could probably be somewhere of decent enough darkness to see more than your average city sky.
Right.
And at least see a few constellations, a little bit of Orion, stuff like that. And even appreciating, like you were saying, some lunar observation, going out where you can see more of the moon, where you can see more of the major planets up around Earth, things like that. It is fantastic to be able to do that and to be able to identify your local celestial bodies in the night sky. It really is a life changer, folks.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's hard to convince people, but you can't convince them of how great something is and that they haven't experienced. It's sort of like with the eclipse a couple of years ago. I knew how incredible it was. And you just can't explain it. The difference between a total eclipse and a partial eclipse. You have to be there. It's such a powerful experience. And so these are things that can be life changers, really. But you have to be able to convince people that this is something they have to experience for themselves.
Yes, and I couldn't have said that better myself, is the fact that it is almost a spiritual experience where you can explain it, but you can't. Yeah. You can't really explain how it changed your life, how it is that it changed your perspective on things. And I guess I know we're coming up close to our time. We've had a few technical issues. Before we have another one, I have a couple of deep questions for you. Number one is someone who has observed the night sky for a long time, for the greater portion of his life. Have you ever seen any anomalies in the night sky while you've been observing?
Well, let's see. I would say through telescopes, no. I mean, sometimes you run into something you're trying to figure out, identify it. There isn't anything you're going to find there that somebody hasn't already seen and cataloged. You may not know what it is. Certainly, sometimes you're going to see something in the sky, some sort of light or something else, and you're not going to know what the source of it is. And that happens because we've got aircraft, or we've got things falling out of the sky, both natural and man-made. Things are going to happen. And so it's just a question of how you define these things. You may look at it and say, my tendency is to say, I don't know what it is. Some people prefer to say, well, if I don't know what it is, it must be aliens. That's not.
Well, I mean,
And then you get that all the time. There's no explanation for it, so let's take the most unlikely thing possible.
Yeah.
That's not the way I view it. I can't recall anything in particular, but certainly, if you live near a city and you go out into a dark sky, you're going to see a cloud that's reflecting light from the city. It's going to look weird, or other things that happen.
Sure.
But you can't. That's just true about life in general. You walk around in a city, you're going to see a lot of things you can't explain. So
that's right. That's right. And I guess question number 2 would butt right up against that. Do you think that there is something out there in the great vast unvoid that is the universe? And cue the Jeopardy music as we reconnect with Skype. So,
I just lost you there.
That's all right. That's all right. The last question I had for you was, do you actively think that there is possibly any other intelligent life out there?
I don't see how it's possible that there isn't. If we're one planet around one star in 100 billion stars, and that's one galaxy, and there are a billion galaxies, how could it be that life is developed in one place in this massive universe? So accepting that is such a long shot. I think it would be more likely to.
Oh. Oh no. Oh. Let's see if we can reconnect here.
Okay.
There he is.
This time we just had a power glitch, so I don't know what happened there. My whole computer shut off. So
well, that's all right. You more than answered the question.
Well,
with what you were saying, it's just one of those like, oh yeah, that's just too funny that it happens right there.
Yeah, right. It might have, it could have been aliens. I don't know.
It could have been.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry about that. I hope you can edit out some of these pauses here. That's
well. And as we wrap up, I want to give you a few minutes here to, at the end of the show, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Astronomers Without Borders, where they can go to get involved, and how they can get involved with you guys.
Well, it's simple enough to find our website, astronomerswithoutborders.org. And the latest updates and programs and things will be posted on there. As far as getting involved, everybody's welcome to participate. One of the things that's coming up that is a big deal to us is Global Astronomy Month. That's every April. This is my follow-on to that 100 Hours of Astronomy that I mentioned earlier, that we every year we continue that tradition of having a celebration of astronomy, but it's been expanded into a month of all kinds of different programs in the arts, in education, in observing community. We have some resource sharing things too, where we have projects that people can contribute to help with education through astronomy, science education, introducing astronomy in developing countries or places that have had troubles. Puerto Rico, we sent 20 telescopes to schools over there, and
fantastic!
There's a program going on there with people in Puerto Rico who are making use of those. And first girls' astronomy camp in Nigeria, where they're actually really, really active in astronomy and using it to introduce education. So the website has got a lot of information on it there, and you can follow along and sign up, join. You can be a free member. It's really a subscription to the newsletter. And we just had a newsletter went out that highlighted some member reports from around the world, from not only the U.S., but from Brazil and let's see, what other countries, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. And you can see what's going on there as well. And, well, very much the same sort of a thing.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like you I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show to explain everything that Astronomers Without Borders is about, to explain your love of astronomy, where it came from, what the roots of this great organization are, and how people can get involved in their local backyard astronomy program, how they can get involved with Astronomers Without Borders and start making a difference, like you said, in places like Puerto Rico and stuff like that, where you're providing telescopes to local schools.
Yeah. Well, and there's more to come. We're sort of in a transitional year. We've got some big things happening and some big partnerships. So there's a lot more to come. So if people don't find exactly what they're interested in, I would say stay tuned, because there's a lot more happening.
Yeah. Well, once again, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and explain everything to our audience. Please do hold the line. While you're online checking out the great work of Astronomers Without Borders at astronomerswithoutborders.org, make sure to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That is where you can find all of the episodes from Dudes and Beer. There is a news link there where you can keep up with the news of the week. A lot of the stuff that we post on our Dudes and Beer Facebook group, a lot that isn't there. You can download the app and listen. You can download the HC Universal Network app and listen to the show as well. There is a listen live page that you can tune into. You can also visit the Dudes and Beer store and pick up some great books. Once again, make sure to stop on by astronomerswithoutborders.org and find out how you can get involved with the great work of Astronomers Without Borders. Mike, once again, thanks so much for coming on and sharing everything with our audience. Until next time, everybody, if you can't be good at it. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.